I have spent the better part of 15 years in airports. I know the particular hush that falls over a terminal after midnight, the way the lights dim just slightly, like the building itself is trying to sleep. I know the sound of distant announcements that no longer apply to anyone awake. I know the cold that seeps in from the runways, the way it finds the gaps in every jacket. I thought I knew everything an airport at night could offer. Then the board went dark, and he sat down next to me. I want to tell you about the hours that followed. Not because they were dramatic. Not because anything happened the way things happen in the stories we tell ourselves about chance and fate. But because somewhere between 2 in the morning and the first gray light of dawn, I remembered something I had quietly forgotten about myself. Stay with me until the very end. What I understood in those final minutes, standing at the mouth of gate C14, that's the part I've been turning over ever since, the part I've never quite been able to put down. The delay came through at 11:53. All departures suspended, weather advisory, updates to follow. I watched the gate agent's face carefully, that particular practiced blankness that means the news is worse than they're saying. Around me the usual ritual began. Phones raised, sighs released. A child somewhere behind me asked why, and her mother said the word tomorrow in a tone that said it was the heaviest word she knew tonight. I had done this before. I would do it again. I found a corner of the terminal that still had its lights on, near a coffee kiosk that had surrendered to the hour, its metal shutter half pulled, one sad stack of cups abandoned on the counter. I pulled out my laptop. I had a deck to revise. I always had a deck to revise. That kiosk has been closed for at least an hour. I looked up. He was standing a few feet away, reading the same half-shuttered counter I'd been staring at, his camera bag hanging from one shoulder like it weighed nothing. He was tall in the way that registers before you consciously notice it. Dark jacket, a few days of something on his jaw. He held a paper cup with the logo of a vending machine coffee, the kind that tastes like warm apology. I know, I said. He looked at the cup in his hand, then at me. I think I paid $2.50 to be disappointed, he said. That's the airport surcharge, I said, for the disappointment. He laughed. It was a quiet laugh, the kind that belongs to someone who finds things genuinely funny rather than performing amusement. He gestured vaguely at the row of seats beside me, asking without asking. I nodded. His name was Daniel. He was 41. He photographed things for a living. Architectural spaces, he said, mostly. Empty rooms. Buildings caught in that strange window between use and abandonment. So, an airport at midnight is basically your natural habitat, I said. He considered this. I never thought about it that way. A pause. But yes, exactly. We didn't stay in those seats long. It was his idea to walk. Not a suggestion exactly, more a quiet observation that the terminal extended further than it appeared, and that somewhere past the darkened duty-free shops, there was apparently a window that faced the runway. He had found it on a previous delay, he said. He thought it might still be there. I closed my laptop. I don't know why. I had a deck to revise. I had 3 unread briefs and a 6:30 connection, or what had been a 6:30 connection, before the board went dark. I had approximately 472 good reasons to stay in my seat and be productive. I closed my laptop and I followed him. The terminal at that hour felt like a different country, shops sealed behind their gates, the carpet swallowing our footsteps, a single cleaning machine humming its lonely circuit somewhere behind us, its orange light blinking like a buoy in fog. We passed a row of charging stations where strangers had fallen asleep in poses of complete surrender, heads back, mouths slightly open, phones in hand like offerings to gods who had stopped responding. Do you ever look at people sleeping in airports, I said, and feel like you're the only one still awake in the world? He looked at the row of sleepers. I feel like that fairly often, he said. Not sad, just honest. I stored that. The window was there, floor to ceiling, facing north, overlooking a sweep of empty tarmac. A few planes sat grounded and motionless, their navigation lights blinking in slow, patient rhythms. Red, then pause, red, then pause. The fog had come in low, softening everything at the edges, and the runway lights beyond stretched out in long amber lines that disappeared into nothing. We stood there for a while without speaking. I noticed that he didn't reach for his camera. You're not going to photograph it? I asked. He looked out at the runway. Some things aren't for photographing. I turned that over in my head. It felt like a philosophy, one he'd arrived at over a long time, not something he said for effect. What makes you decide? I asked. Which things are for the camera and which aren't? He thought about it seriously. I appreciated that. I was not accustomed to being taken seriously when I asked questions that didn't have a correct answer. When I feel the urge to step back, he said finally. That's usually the moment I should stay close instead. He was still looking at the runway when he said it. That was the first time I felt it. That quiet shift in the air between two people, the one that happens before either of them has done anything at all. We found coffee eventually, a vending machine near the international gates that produced something hot and dark enough to pass for real. We sat on the floor against the window, which felt mildly absurd, and also, somehow, like exactly the right decision. He asked about the consulting, what I actually did, underneath all the vocabulary that made it sound important. I told him about the cities, the hotels, the sameness of conference rooms from Houston to Helsinki, how she could walk into any corporate lobby in the world and know within 4 seconds which direction the elevators were. That's a remarkable skill, he said. It's a remarkable waste, I said. The word surprised me as much as him. I hadn't known I believed that until I heard it out loud. He didn't offer comfort. He didn't rush to contradict me. He just sat with it, the way certain people can sit with the uncomfortable things you say, without trying to sweep them away before they settle. My ex-wife used to say I lived in the in-between spaces, he said after a moment. Airports, hotel lobbies, waiting rooms before surgeries. She said it like it was a deficiency. He turned his cup slowly in his hands. I think she was probably right about the observation. I'm less sure she was right about what it meant. The in-between spaces. I thought about my own life. The accumulated hours in terminals and departure lounges, the cities I'd left before I'd ever arrived, the conversations that had never had time to finish themselves. I thought about how I'd always framed that as efficiency, productivity, the cost of doing something that mattered. I hadn't thought to wonder what it might be the cost of. What do you think it means? I asked. He looked at me for a moment before answering. I think some people are built for the threshold, for the moment before the door opens. A pause. I think there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you know it's what you are. The runway lights blinked on in the fog beyond the glass. Red, then pause. Red, then pause. I had never in 15 years of airports looked at a delayed departure and thought, thank you. I don't know when we moved from sitting to walking again. Time in those hours had become liquid. It pooled and shifted, sped in places, grew perfectly still in others. We walked the length of Terminal B twice. We found a closed bookshop and read the spines through the glass. He pointed at a photography monograph and said the photographer was brilliant, but had the ego of a small moon, and I laughed harder than I had in recent memory. We found a vending machine that had, inexplicably, gourmet almonds beside the usual assortment of sadness. We ate them sitting on the floor near Gate B7, talking about the places we'd been where we'd felt most like ourselves. He said, a fishing village in Portugal, before dawn, when the boats came in. I thought for a long time. I said, a train, years ago, through the Scottish Highlands, alone, not going anywhere in particular. Were you running from something? He asked. I was running towards something I couldn't name yet. Did you find it? I looked at the dark window across the concourse, at the foggy nothing beyond the glass. I filed it away, I said quietly, and then I got very busy. He nodded. He didn't press. He understood the way certain things get filed, not abandoned, just held in a drawer you stop opening. The terminal had grown entirely still around us. The distant sound of the cleaning machine had long since faded. Somewhere, a door opened and closed. The lights above us hummed their low, continuous note. He said, "Can I ask you something?" I said yes. "When is the last time you went somewhere without a deliverable?" I opened my mouth. I closed it. The question sat between us like a lit candle, small, impossible to ignore. "I don't know," I said finally. That might be the most honest thing I've said in a long time. He was looking at me with an attention that was neither intrusive nor casual, something in between. The particular attention of someone who sees what they're looking at clearly and knows that seeing is enough. I became quietly, completely aware of the space between us. I don't know which of us moved first. I don't think it was a decision in the way decisions are usually made. I think we had both simply arrived somewhere, through hours of walking and talking and sitting on airport floors and eating gourmet almonds at 2 a.m, and when I turned to find him looking at me, the distance between us was no longer quite the same distance it had been. His hand found mine in the low light, not reaching, not urgent, just there. We stayed like that for a long moment, the terminal silent around us, the fog pressing soft against the glass, the runway lights blinking their patient red rhythm, and something that had been held very tightly in my chest for a very long time, released. He pressed his forehead gently to mine. We didn't speak. There wasn't anything to say that wouldn't have made it smaller. The board updated at 4:47. Departures resuming. Gate assignments posted. Please proceed to your gate. We heard the announcement together, felt it arrive like weather. He had gate C14. I had gate A2. The terminal branched ahead of us like a sentence with two endings, and we stood at the point where it divided. He picked up his camera bag. I picked up mine. We looked at each other in the gray early light that had begun to press itself against the windows. I don't want to do the thing, he said, where we exchange numbers and promise to be in the same city sometime. No, I agreed. Because this was... He stopped, looked out at the lightning windows. I think this was complete, he said finally. The way certain things are, where adding more would only take something away. I understood him exactly. I stood up on the edge of something, leaned forward, and pressed a soft kiss to the corner of his mouth. His hand found my arm, briefly, quietly, and then I stepped back. Safe flight, I said. Safe travels, he said. And then we walked in opposite directions through an airport that looked, for the first time in 15 years, entirely different to me. There is a kind of connection that lives in the in-between spaces, in the hours that don't belong to schedules or deliverables, in the terminals between departure and arrival, in conversations that have no agenda, nowhere to be, nothing to produce. I used to move through those spaces with purpose, efficiently, eyes forward, always already at the next thing. I am still learning to slow down in them. I am still learning what it means that a stranger in an empty airport over bad vending machine coffee and gourmet almonds reminded me what it felt like to be genuinely present somewhere, not passing through, not in transit. There. I filed that away too, but I check that drawer now, more often than I used to. If something about this story found you tonight, maybe the image of two people walking an empty airport at 3 a.m, having the kind of conversation that doesn't happen when the world is watching, I'd love to know. Leave me a comment below. Tell me about a stranger who left something behind, and if you haven't yet, consider subscribing. These stories are for anyone who has ever felt most alive somewhere between one place and the next.